It looks like we're good. Perfect. All right, thanks everyone. Now for the second part of the evening. We're very pleased to have legendary Erik Voorhees here with us tonight. I'll start off with a few questions, then we'll open it up to the audience. Just raise your hand and make sure you get a microphone. We'll hand those out again, just so that the people at home can hear the questions. And if somebody else keep an eye on some of the questions coming in through either Discord or YouTube, that'd be great. We can maybe keep an eye on that. But welcome, Erik, here tonight.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, awesome.
That last talk was super cool. Like
yeah.
I, if I'm honest, I probably understood about 15% of it.
Damn.
But I understand enough to be extremely impressed with that like depth of knowledge, and it's just very cool that like a group will come together and just talk about that kind of like crazy fundamental technology. So, yeah, it's cool to be here just as a guest.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and way to go, Yoni. Shout out to Yoni. Doc as well. All right, have you been to any other crypto hacker spaces like this?
I went to one in Berlin long ago, and then one in Vienna long ago. I don't remember what they were called. But this definitely has like the authentic vibe.
Sweet,
yeah.
Sweet. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, we kind of tried to keep that vibe around as it's been years. So great. Well, I'm glad you got to see it. So when you first started to understand how powerful this whole like crypto technology was, do you feel the space is further ahead or behind in terms of innovation and adoption as to where you had imagined it to be today?
Good question. So yeah, like when I first learned about Bitcoin, this was 2011. I felt like it had a chance to be the dominant form of money on the earth, and that was a very crazy thing to think back then. Certainly, it's a little less crazy now. Like it's grown to a tremendous size. Everyone in the world has heard of it, right? Like you can't get into an Uber now and mention the word, and they'll be like, "What did you say?" Like they don't know the word. Everyone knows this word, so that's big. And even though it's not yet the money of the world, it's growing. And what I didn't predict, and what I think most people that early didn't see coming, was just the branching of the technology into these new fields. So Bitcoin as its own narrative arc is very impressive, but it has spawned all these other technologies that have come out of blockchains, right? So Ethereum and smart contracts being the biggest example, NFTs being another more recent example. So that's very cool, and it's become like a very complex industry. There's entire fields that I know nothing about, lots and lots of people that I've never met before. It's like in the early days I knew everyone. So I feel increasingly ignorant, even though I'm in it full time, and I think that's a good sign that it's growing.
Amazing. All right, next thing, with fees on both Bitcoin and Ethereum, they're ramping up heavily right now, and in particular a time without like a majority of mass adoption coming to join us right now. Do you see this being a blocker, and are there any concerns that might drive users to centralized exchanges rather than being on chain?
Yeah, I think everyone understands or should understand that like the world can't use crypto systems on layer ones, or to the degree that they do, they have to be relatively centralized and highly performant. That's kind of always been true, and as fees go up, obviously like usage on those base chains becomes more high friction. The negative of that is that a lot of people use it for the first time and are like, well, what the hell is this? Like, why do I have to spend $20 to send a transaction? But that is also what encourages and incentivizes the development of the layer 2s and the cross-chain work. Like, so it's an important growing pain, but certainly into this next year, I think we're going to have a big year of price and speculation and adoption and like all those good things. A lot of people are going to be complaining, and I think a lot of people are going to move to cheaper chains, some of which may not be as decentralized as we want. And I actually think that's maybe okay, because there's not just like one chain, right? Like if by the end of next year, whatever chain was growing the fastest was the chain for the world, we'd all have to care a lot about where it ended up. But I think part of the decentralization of this technology is that different chains get used for different things, and there's going to be faster chains that are more centralized and slower chains that are more decentralized, and that's all okay. And we don't need to have wars about it. We can just appreciate that, like, that's part of the diversification.
Yeah, great. We'll talk more here about other networks and stuff in a minute, but also with like the recent innovation of on Bitcoin with things like Ordinals and BRCs, which kind of alludes to like network congestion. Do you feel like those are beneficial to the space? Are those being, or are they going to be competitive with things built on other chains? Do you feel like this leads to more on-chain issues? I think, like, as you kind of alluded to, but yeah, is it competitive with like the NFTs and other things that we're seeing on Ethereum? Or what's your take on Ordinals and BRCs?
I think people are too quick to judge some of this new stuff as like, that's a good thing or that's a bad thing, right? Like, let's just not judge them so much and realize that we've unlocked these decentralized databases that the whole world can use and access, and people are going to figure out all kinds of interesting use cases for this stuff, and that's good. Like, it's healthy that 15 years into Bitcoin's history, entirely new portions of it are getting unlocked and utilized. I think that's very cool, right? Like, what else is going to get unlocked in a year or in 10 years? These are signs of healthy, robust ecosystems. So I don't know if these things are like good or bad, pro or con. I just know that I would like to see more activity like this. And, on net, I think that experimentation is a really good sign.
Cool. Yeah. Great to hear that. Would you say, what are some of the like main components the industry needs to focus on when for mass adoption and to continue to scale?
I was on a podcast a few days ago, and I had a similar question, which is like, what do we need to care about as mass adoption occurs? And my answer then, which is the same, is that when we see like a lot of the mass adoption, when we've seen these speculative waves and a bunch of people get involved, the depth of their understanding of this stuff is pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. And I don't say that to be like judgy on those people. I say it as maybe a wake-up call to everyone that the average Coinbase user is a fool. They don't know what they're doing. They don't understand self-custody, right, at all. They don't understand the difference between chains. They buy a coin because some friend told them it was going up, and that's the extent of their understanding of cryptocurrency. That's a big problem. However, it's also good that price goes up, friends invite people, and like they get interested in it. And some portion of those new people that are fools when they start end up learning more and more and more, and they become like the users of tomorrow and the attendees of your sessions like 6 months from now. So I think just like for those people who care about this stuff and care why it's getting built, to really recognize how flimsy the knowledge is of the newest users, and try to figure out good ways of coaxing them, not to becoming like crypto experts, but just to teach them the basics and to give them at least a 101 understanding of what this stuff is.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Yeah, there's this next year I can see like there being such a huge wave again, just like we saw a few years ago with just like people diving into this, and then I'm hearing so many people on centralized exchanges and all this stuff, and rather than understanding even just the basics, like why, what does this stuff exist for? How can this actually work? So
yeah. Well, like how many people saw an FTX ad at the Super Bowl, went and created an FTX account, and then got totally wrecked? Like, we need to do better than that. And I don't have a good solution for that other than to just make sure people are aware of that problem to start.
Yeah, I think there's like, even on that point with like trying to tell people, oh, we just carry these 24 words or 12 words or whatever, and here's a hardware wallet, and you need to connect this, and like keep this safe, and if you lose it, like that's not great for mass adoption. But at the end of the day, sovereignty and security, comes at a cost. And for me, and I hope for many others here as well, that's something that they'll take for now. But yeah, I'm hoping that there's going to be other solutions. I don't know if you've seen anything out there or other for that sort of stuff, onboarding people to keeping them safe with maintaining custody.
Onboarding is a perpetual problem, and I think observers often think that this is a problem with cryptocurrency. The onboarding stuff sucks because you're essentially changing complete paradigms from analog money in banks to digitally native money on blockchains. It's like a change of realm, right? Like, and it's a change of psychology. It's a change of habit and behavior and terminology. This isn't just like some new fintech app that someone has a little learning curve to see what the new UI is. It's an entirely different paradigm of how money and value work. And we can just like respect that there's a gap and a learning process that has to happen there.
Cool. Yeah, that's. I'm glad to hear that, because like that gap, I don't really seen how that can go away, and maybe it's good that it is there, so that we can actually give people the actual sovereignty that they need. So, yeah.
Yeah. When the sovereign bond market collapses and like fiat currencies are going up in flames, this is going to be a big problem, because everyone's going to be trying to figure this stuff out in a panicky mode, and all the blockchains are going to be full, and fees on Bitcoin are going to be like $500 a transaction. It's going to be a fucking mess.
Well, speaking of other networks, other than Bitcoin and EVM systems, are there other like ecosystems or networks that kind of interest you around, I guess, all the scaling and everything else?
Are you trying to get me to shill a coin? Is that
absolutely not? Absolutely not. No. But
I will use the opportunity to shill the coin that I've been talking about for years, which is Thorchain.
Yeah.
So Thorchain, for those of you who don't know, is like the world's only DEX that actually does to the largest asset in the world of Bitcoin. Right. So you're trying to do a trade of Bitcoin to ETH without an intermediary. There's only one protocol that can actually do it at scale. And this is incredibly important. And I know it has like a stupid name, and I know it got hacked a few times in its early days. Some people dismiss it because of those two things, right? But as a project, I think it truly embodies the ethos of permissionless finance. It's an incredibly beautiful mechanism of how it works. It's designed to be permissionless and to be unstoppable. So I don't care if people go buy the coin. I do care that people try it out and just know that there's a way to trade across these chains in a permissionless way, so that you're not using, the FTXs of the world.
Perfect. Well, thank you on that. Yeah, I want to try and drive as many people as possible on chain, even if it is the cost of all of that. Like, thankfully, I've only been rugged on 4 centralized exchanges, just 4. So this is where I'm like, you know what? Okay, if it's going to cost you $20 to do this, like, that sucks. But the alternative is that it's all going to go to zero and you're going to lose it all. And it's going to happen again. I don't know who the next one's going to be, and I don't want to predict. I don't even want to be involved in it. So I will promote that as like, be on board with a centralized exchange if that's what you need to do, and immediately get your funds off of there. And then you can use things as just Erik has just suggested. Use something like Thorchain. There's bridges. There's all kinds of things.
Yeah, and there's actually like a more fundamental reason to get on chain. Like, certainly the getting rugged by a centralized exchange is a big one, but we need to be honest that like a DEX can have a horrible bug and rug you through collapse of the DEX too, right? Like, there's existential risk whether you're centralized or decentralized. DEXs, I think, over time can get more provably trustworthy because they're open source. But the real reason to be on chain is because as this stuff gets more adversarial, as the governments of the world try to ring fence these things and prevent people from actually taking control of their own money and their own value and their own lives, if you are stuck on the wrong side of that fence and you don't know what you're doing, it's like you learned about the lifeboat and you never got in it, right? It's like if there were on the Titanic like a bunch of fake lifeboats that looked like lifeboats, but you get in and you realize they're tied to the ship, there'd be a problem, right? So learn about off-chain, because the entire point of crypto, the entire point is for it to be permissionless. That's it. There is no reason for all this stuff to exist but for the permissionlessness. That's the reason that you should spend time, spend the $20 transaction fee to learn how these systems work and other people do the same.
Amazing. Thank you. Yeah, that's, yeah. Now, like, we're going to touch on, so just as you kind of talked about, like with some of the regulatory stuff and whatnot. But
It's my favorite topic.
many of us look at the U.S. under the current regulatory landscape, which appears very hostile and grim towards crypto. Throughout some of your circles, are you seeing positive ways forward or some light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah, so stepping back, early on in Bitcoin's history, a lot of us, I think, were much more worried that the U.S. federal government and others would try to kill or squash Bitcoin cryptocurrency entirely much earlier on. That was possible because the stuff is an absolute existential threat to government's control over money. I guess through their own hubris and or economic ignorance, they don't really see it. They don't really see it yet as an economic threat. They see it as like, oh yeah, some people might not pay some taxes, or there might be some money laundering or something, but they don't yet see it as a actual existential threat to the dollar, which is good for us. But I have to take solace in the fact that that kind of clampdown has not occurred, right? So as bad as things do seem in the U.S. from a regulatory perspective, they're not nearly as bad as they could be. And I think we're well past the point where that can ever happen. I think like the frog in the boiling water phenomenon, enough of the population is comfortable and understands crypto that it's harder and harder to vilify it as this like niche thing that's only used on Silk Road. You know, we no longer have, well, I guess Elizabeth Warren's trying to kind of bring that messaging back. So we need to still be vigilant. But, there are people in the government that own crypto and love it, and they advocate for it. So it's going to be a messy battle over the long haul. One of the very cool things that I think people don't appreciate enough is that the age of the population matters here, and each year that goes by, the average person is more open to cryptocurrency and holds more of it just from an age difference, right? So the average 50-year-old and the average 20-year-old are very different in how open they are to crypto. So there is a clock ticking on what governments can do. At some point, 80% of the population will be relatively comfortable with cryptocurrency, right? And we've won long before that point.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm glad you have some positive insight for us here. I'm glad to hear all those things because...
Yeah, but the next like 10 or 15 years could be pretty bad.
Well, strap in, everyone. You're hitting the right place. All right, and then next part here with, as we get closer to the ETF, like, do you have any custodial or centralized concerns around the US ETF, should that finally get approved?
I want it to be approved. I mean, there's zero reason why consenting adults shouldn't be able to create a ETF contract on public markets and buy it and sell it. It's crazy that we have these gatekeepers like the SEC telling adults what they can buy with their own money for years. And I have to notice that, like, if the ETFs are approved in January, Bitcoin will be at 40K or 50K or whatever. All of the appreciation from when these things were first filed, like back in 2013, 14, all of that appreciation from $200, $300 Bitcoin up till 40,000 was lost to the retail investor because of Gary Gensler. Well, he wasn't responsible for all of it, but because of the institution of the SEC, right? So you can actually like quantify the robbery of the SEC on the people that they're actually supposed to protect. So I'm getting off topic a little bit.
Not really. That's really good stuff that you're bringing up here.
The ETF, it's obviously inevitable that it will be approved eventually. It should be. Will various parties try to manipulate prices and play games with it, with Bitcoin once that happens? Yes, but we shouldn't be scared of that. Like, we are people of DeFi. We understand adversarial environments, right? Like, let all these people try, as long as they're not committing fraud, to game each other. That's the natural state of economics. So we don't need to be scared of that. Ultimately, no matter how much manipulation you have of centralized ledgers at the ETF, you can't manipulate the blockchains themselves. And that's where the truth lies. And as long as we have that, we're good.
Good point. Good point. Yeah, it's all on chain at the end of the day.
It's all on chain.
And I'm glad you bring up like like value lost, I guess, or that value that wasn't uncaptured. I never really thought about it in that way. The fact that, yes, like over a decade ago, we had ETF filings, and the fact that even if it was took 5 years at that point to approve one, and that appreciation that was not captured by retail investors
and other than just the quantity of it, like the greatest investment of the last decade, the greatest investment unequivocally of the last decade was prevented from normal people in their normal retirement accounts because of the SEC. Right? Like, why are they not in prison for that robbery?
That's very fair. Very fair. Damn. Oh. All right. Well, I guess moving away from our friends in the U.S., where in the world do you see the most positive outlook and acceptance towards crypto?
I feel like Dubai is taking the cake right now. Singapore is also good. Dubai and Singapore seem to be doing well. The UK, for a stodgy Western nation, is actually doing a lot better than most European countries, and certainly better than the US. So those are some bright spots.
Okay, very cool. So if anybody's looking for other places, that's things that you can look at. But yeah, if we want to open it up now to the audience, if anybody's interested and wants a question here, we can hand that out. Just hold it. Yeah. Oh yeah, if there's a question. Okay, perfect. Go ahead.
So you, Erik, have been in the crypto space for a long time. So you know that Bitcoin was a response to the fiat world for the decentralization and so on. But how do you see it? How do you see the future of Bitcoin, knowing that now it's getting very centralized by mining pools, and also the fact that transaction can be censored, as it happened like a week ago?
Okay, so yeah, two different questions. So, how do I feel about the decentralizing force of mining pools, and the fact that transactions can be censored? It's funny to hear this as a concern because, like, we were having all these same debates in 2011 on the forums. Like, back then, there was a pool that got damn close to 50%. I forget which pool it was. It's maybe Slush. So there were, and multiple ones that were in like the high or the mid double digits. I think it's unequivocally more decentralized than it used to be, even though today might look more centralized than a year ago. Like, these things fluctuate. And in terms of pools, this is a really important point because these same arguments were made back then. People misconstrue the influence that the pool has and the users that they have. They misconstrue that as control. Right? The pool doesn't actually control the miners in the pool. It currently serves the miners in the pool, but the miners can go elsewhere, right? So there is no monopoly. Like a pool that grows up to 50% has no hold on the miners within it. They can leave. And the game theory works because everyone mining Bitcoin has a long-term interest in Bitcoin's success. No one wants a single pool or a single party to get anywhere close to 50%. So this is, I think, a self-correcting problem, but people should be vigilant and watch it, and when pools get too large, people should get loud and talk about it. But I don't think it's a serious issue. It's just one that people need to tend. And in terms of censorship, we have to be careful with our language. Like a certain pool or a certain miner can obviously censor any transaction that they want through their own block finding, but they can't prevent other people from mining that same transaction. So again, we have a self-correcting problem where any transaction that comes out, anyone can pick it up. No one's forced to, and that's the balance of a free market. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Okay, thank you.
Also, your accent is very cool.
I have a question. Kind of going on decentralization and that type of stuff. There's been a tendency over the past year, maybe a bit longer, of geo-blocking a lot of applications, and then beyond that, geo-blocking even infrastructure, like Alchemy and Infura were geo-blocking some regions, so like even within your own wallet, which you thought was self-custody, you couldn't actually access your funds. How do you see that moving forward with like the amount of pressure we have from certain entities, even if you're not even in the U.S.? And how have you seen other projects kind of react to that, given, like, from my experience, a lot of people trying to leave the U.S. if they are building a project, just severing ties, but are you seeing that just people are being a lot more cautious with how they're building things?
Yes, people are being a lot more cautious. That is to be expected. Like, as these systems grow and become more relevant, the adversarial environment will get more heated. So we should expect politicians to get more aggressive, and we should expect participants of these networks and apps to get more conservative. From the U.S. perspective, territory restrictions tend to come down to sanctions rules, which stem from Department of Treasury and OFAC. OFAC stands for the Office of Foreign Assets Control. OFAC stipulates individual people, various companies, and entire countries, which the rule is, if you are an American, you may not do business with anyone on these lists. There are tens of millions of people on these lists, and most of them are absolutely innocent people, right? Like, the entire country of Iran is on the OFAC list, and 99% of Iranians are good people who haven't hurt anyone. Why in the world is it illegal for me to do business with a peaceful person in Iran, right? Like, it's not racist because Iran isn't a race, but it is somethingist. Like, it's certainly unethical. And so that set of laws is very strict, and this is why you see certain applications blocking certain territories. And it always sucks, like, right, when you go to a website, you go to a crypto app and it's like not available in this jurisdiction or something, or not available to Americans because America is a high-risk jurisdiction now. That always sucks, and it's like, oh, well, I thought this stuff was supposed to be permissionless. And you have to look a little more deeply, right? Like, there's nuance here. So any particular application is going to have to comply with laws as long as they are a centralized application. Whoever the people are that are building those things are going to feel compelled and coerced to abide by the laws of wherever they're residing. But that's the application layer, right? The blockchains don't care. They have no conception of countries. They have no conception of the boundaries of Iran. And they do not discriminate. So what that means is that people in different countries, different jurisdictions with different legal frameworks can build in a way that's compliant for that jurisdiction. And because users have a choice of all these things, they can go to whomever will serve them. And ultimately, the most important foundational layer itself is permissionless. And as long as that's true, everything else can adapt and be flexible around it. And it is, I think, strategically good for many projects, including especially the largest ones, to be completely compliant with their laws in their country, because that prevents the excuse of politicians to go crazy and try to squash the industry. So just from like a game theory perspective, it's good that that happens. And what matters most is that that fundamental layer remains open and permissionless. And if that's there, we're doing good.
Anybody else?
Go ahead,
Okay.
and we'll have a question.
Yeah, for sure. As we possibly approach growing user base again and higher prices, higher everything, what do you think should be our next focus? Like, should we focus heavily on regulation? Should we focus heavy on education, user experience, or should it be all these things? And do we have a ticking time? We have to hit this before the next wave, or is it a long game where just always work on this?
It's absolutely a long game. And like I said, it's a long game that we win by default because the clock is not ticking on our side. That's ticking on the other. I think like all these questions of like, what should the industry do are missing the greatest strength of the industry, which is that it is a decentralized industry moving in lots of different directions with lots of different strategies, right? It is a hydra. And we don't need to think what the industry should do as a monolith. We can just appreciate that lots of smart people, lots of dumb people, lots of like mid-curve people are all trying to push and build this stuff in lots of interesting creative ways. and we just let that organic process play out. It doesn't need to be centrally orchestrated or planned. We don't need to know where it should go. It just can be let be, right? It's a very like Zen, laissez-faire kind of thing. And I used to worry a lot more about like, oh, what do we need to be doing as the Bitcoin industry to grow and gain adoption? And I've stepped back and realized like the fundamentals are sound, and because of that, we don't need to push it out into the world. It will be pulled into the world by usage and by the laws of capital and economics. So that's nice, right? We can just enjoy the ride.
I think we had another one back here somewhere.
It's me. So one of my favorite moments in recent, is this thing on? There we go. In recent decentralization history was when, Erik, you made the decision to decentralize Shapeshift. I literally remember just standing up and being like, yes! Because it, to me, represented the bigger ideals behind a lot of this technology. And that's a hard decision to make. So I just wanted to see if you'd speak a little bit about when you first created Shapeshift and then when you decided to ultimately, I don't know if this is the right phrase to put it, but like give it away to some extent. What that process was like and what was going through your mind at the beginning and at the decentralization process.
Yeah, good question. So Shapeshift started in 2014 as a centralized exchange that was non-custodial. So you'd send in coin A, and we, from our own wallets, would send back coin B. So we protected users by not holding their funds and by not taking all their private information, which we didn't want and shouldn't have in the first place. And as crypto systems are permissionless, we were not. And as we grew, we went under the spotlight of essentially every government regulator from here to Switzerland and several other countries. And ultimately, through various means, were coerced into doing something which I felt was highly unethical and bad. We had to impose KYC, which means, that's a nice little acronym for just wholesale spying on innocent people. Like, let's just call it what it is. And that was like one of the most gut-wrenching things I've ever done. I felt like the choice was between that or not doing it and ending up in jail with the whole company shut down, which wouldn't help our users or me or our employees, or shut the company down myself, which then wouldn't help the customers or our employees, right? So it's like screwed up no matter what. But what's beautiful about this technology is like people kept innovating with decentralized technology and DEXs started being formed. Uniswap being the one that really caught my attention. And when I saw how that worked and I started really researching like how these rules are, realized that like to the degree Shapeshift could be decentralized and not be an intermediary, not be a financial intermediary, we could reattach ourselves with the ethos of crypto and shed like all of the nonsense regulations that have been imposed on us. So we did it. We open sourced everything. We connected DEXs, both Thorchain and Uniswap, to our backend to process all our trading. And we shed all of the KYC on Shapeshift. And then we went into the regulators and we told them that we were doing this. Like I gave a presentation to FinCEN that we are dissolving the company and decentralizing it. That was a fun day. And it worked. Like the decentralization strategy works for two reasons. One, it changes the power dynamic between a centralized government and its victims. When its victims are many and obscured and hard to find, the cost of violence against them skyrockets, and it just is implausible to do. And two, all or most financial laws, at least in the United States, are built on the concept of financial intermediaries, which stems from the 1971 Bank Secrecy Act. all financial law for the last 15 years in the United States is built on this concept of being a financial intermediary. If you're not a financial intermediary, suddenly these things don't apply to you. Now, governments may try to change those laws, but those are like foundational laws that will take years to change, and there will be pushback, and like we have time to watch that happen if it does. But it's all been like a beautiful demonstration in the power of decentralization, and for me, almost like a spiritual retribution of like when I was able to return to the principles of decentralization that actually solved the practical problems and the political problems and the regulatory problems. So the lesson is stay decentralized. That is the only reason why this stuff exists, and it is our greatest defense against all the adversaries.
Beautiful, beautiful. We got another one here.
I have a question. So blockchain and AI. So what could be the possible, like, most possible synergy, bad or good, in your opinion?
Cool question. Okay. 3 months ago, I wouldn't have had a good answer to this. But I've been getting more and more involved in some of this AI stuff. And so all of you have probably used like ChatGPT, right? An amazing product, amazing technology, changing the world in all sorts of ways. But it suffers from a couple things. One, the entire conversation that you have is surveilled by OpenAI. They store every message. And if the government asks them for them, they will ship it off to the government. Like you can bet your ass that all of that stuff is going off to the government. If certain keywords are flagged or if the government just asks for it, they will do it. That's a problem. Two, the answers that you get back are censored. And you've all felt this if you do these things, right? In little ways and in big ways, the answers come back with like all these guardrails, right? Like a bunch of like wokeism stuff or all this like hedging where they want to make sure you're not doing anything risky, so they treat you like a 5-year-old. And it's just embarrassing, right? Like it's embarrassing to be an adult and have a computer treat you as if you are less than the computer, right? Like I think we've all felt this. And that censorship angle is going to get worse, right? Like as AI systems get imbued in more and more parts of the economy and more and more people's devices, government regulation is going to force the confinement of what you can learn and what you can ask to certain rules imposed and enforced by OpenAI, not Open, or any of the other centralized AI companies. Blockchain's decentralization in general, the best thing it can do for AI is to help AI decentralize such that when you ask a question, it's not going to a centralized company that censors it and spies on you and sends it back, but it's going out to a randomized network of individual nodes that can send answers back to you as long as it's performant. Like that can be a really good experience. So both to avoid the surveillance and the censorship, the principles of decentralization and AI coming together, I think is a really exciting area. So that would be my answer there.
Yeah, it's really brilliant to hear all those other things about, thinking about like where all that data is going to end up. So like in the past, I'm usually chatting with, when I do my chat GPT, I always, oh, thank you, how's your day? Being really nice to them. But maybe it's time to like, throw some shout outs to JPow and JL and Lizzie Dub and, make sure they're on our side too. I don't know.
Yeah. And I have no problem with the OpenAIs of the world existing. They should be applauded for pioneering what is some of the coolest technology in the world, 100%. But if that's the only way that people can interact with AIs through these like centralized censored things, then we have screwed up as a civilization. And we need decentralized alternatives. Not that it always needs to be decentralized, but that alternative needs to exist for society to be healthy.
Cool. We had another question.
Quick question. Recently watched your speech at, I think it was Permissionless, which had millions of views. I thought that was... Did anyone else see it? Really good. I think it was the best speech I've seen on crypto decentralization. You probably don't have time to give it again, but could you paraphrase it for us?
Sure.
If you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I was really glad to see the response to that, both because, it stroked my ego a bit, but more importantly, like that message resonated with the crypto industry so well was a really good sign. It would be very bad if that kind of message fell on deaf ears or everyone was like, what the fuck is he talking about? So that was great. I think that was a really healthy sign. The points I made there largely came down to the importance of being permissionless, like the importance of why money is permissionless, and that we should obviously, as adults, have the right to interact with each other economically without coercion being imposed on us. That's should be obvious, at least for someone in like the, the free West, right? Like maybe in communist China 50 years ago that would not be accepted, but in America that should not be an extreme position. And two, I tried to convey that like those of us building these things, while many of us are anarchists in the good sense of that word, we are not against order. That we are actually building systems of order that are better, far better than many of the legal systems that we are trying to route around. So for example, like smart contracts are an incredible creation of order and regimenting activity. What is better at regulating money, the SEC and FinCEN or smart contracts, right? Which one is more democratic, first of all? Smart contracts can be read by everyone. It's open source. They can be created by everyone. It's open source, right? A regulator is this closed door thing, sort of tangentially related to people that were elected by 26% of the population. And it's just the whole like, this whole myth that crypto is anti-order needs to stop. It is superior order. And I was really trying to get across that like, let's espouse that as a great creation of this industry instead of everyone thinking that we're just trying to like, destroy all the banks. That we're actually creating order instead of just destroying stuff. So those were like some of the main themes of that talk.
Yeah, if anybody hasn't seen that, be sure to watch it. I'll say that like I've had it pinned as my top tweet since September. So thank you for that.
Thanks.
Chat.
I have to give a little shout out to Riva over here who inspired a lot of it and helped me with it. So she was great.
Nice. All right, we've got time for a couple more questions. Yeah, sweet.
We talked about U.S. regulation, and with the U.S. government being the largest holder of Bitcoin, how much of a risk do you think that is to the industry?
Are they the biggest holder of Bitcoin?
From my understanding, yes.
Well,
top 5, top 6.
Well,
rephrase.
That's unfortunate.
Their goal will be obviously to get to number 1, whether it's through.
So these were some of the fantasies we talked about, like in 2011. Like, well, what happens if the U.S. government tries to buy all the coins? Awesome, right? Like, if that happened, maybe in some weird theoretical way they could like destroy Bitcoin by acquiring it all. But by doing so, they would make all the most radical people in the world extremely rich, right? Like that's from a game theory perspective is probably not what they want to do, especially because then we would just use some different blockchain, different asset, right? Like it doesn't really accomplish anything. The U.S. government is welcome to bid on all the coins, right? Like any other government or any sovereign wealth fund or anyone. Like these are free and open systems. And I don't want the wealth accrual of Bitcoin's appreciation to accrue to governments, but the smart ones will be acquiring it. And I think like if there was ever a way for a small country that no one cared about to like leapfrog most of the other countries in the world in terms of their finances, this is so obviously the way. And some of them are going to figure that out.
You noted how the industry has like really grown since you've been around, and I'm curious to know what kind of corner of crypto do you find most intellectually stimulating, or like I don't know, sector or an infrastructure that you find yourself just like deep diving into in addition to AI, I'm assuming.
I think I tend to stick around in the DeFi world most, largely because it's it's an extension of what brought me into the industry, which was Bitcoin as base money. Like, and I feel that that's by far the most important piece and the most important root. But money itself is not a financial system. So I've loved smart contracts and everything that Ethereum and other chains have done to like create actually decentralized finance instead of just decentralized money. And even just that narrow field is so dynamic. Like I can't keep up with it all. I feel like I'm constantly learning, and there's always people telling me about stuff that I hadn't heard about, and all these brilliant people creating new systems. Like I can't even keep up with that. So yeah, the DeFi world is where I like to sit and study, and I'm glad other people are focused on other parts of it as well.
Yeah, one more right here. What are your thoughts on cross-chain and interoperability?
I see this coming from someone in a Layer 0 hat.
I had to. I'm sorry.
No, it's great. It's a great question. So interoperability between chains is a huge holy grail, right? Like the different blockchains are built as different engineered machines with their own trade-offs. Some of them are good for certain things and not others, and that's always going to be the case because these are engineered devices. Like an airplane is not a good boat, and a boat is not a good airplane, right? And we can just respect that we should have both of those machines and use them when appropriate. But it is unfortunate that we've gotten to this point with, a couple dozen important blockchains, and they are all islands to a large degree. We are finally, in the last year or two, seeing people start to be able to bridge and move between these things, and messaging systems like Layer 0, like starting to weave some of that sinew between these chains. I think that's amazing. It's absolutely a holy grail, and if you can stitch the advantages of the chains together technically and securely such that applications don't need to care about the chains underneath, then we've built something really, really powerful. So hugely important. I'm glad a lot of people are working on it.
Okay.
Can I go?
Go ahead.
First, I just wanted to say thank you, Erik, for coming and hanging out with us tonight. It's really appreciated. I was also going to mention your speech at Permissionless. I think I can speak for like a lot of people here to say that we were like really inspired by it, and it came at a good time when we'd been like beaten down by a lot of shit, and it was like the perfect pick me up. So it really resonated with like crypto natives, but the average person still doesn't really care about decentralization or permissionlessness or self-custody or gross government oversight, or they don't know why they should care. They're like blissfully ignorant. So my question is, like, how do you approach that type of conversation with maybe someone who isn't crypto native? What are the narratives and emotions that you would appeal to, and could you give us your like normie elevator pitch?
Yeah. So when I first learned about Bitcoin, obviously I was so excited about it, and I wanted to tell everyone, right? And I had all these great like economic arguments why Bitcoin had a chance of being like the base money of the world, and how cool like this cryptography was, and how powerful it was that someone could like have a private key, and not even the U.S. government can like crack that. Like all the power of the U.S. government can't crack a private key. That's absolutely so empowering for individual people. So I can make like ideological arguments and like technical arguments and economic arguments, but you know what actually gets people interested? Send them $10 of a crypto, and when it goes to $11, they'll be fucking hooked. And it might sound like a little cynical, but it activates some part of the reptilian brain, and once they feel that, it allows their brain to like want to learn about a new system. When someone has made a little bit of money with crypto, they are looking at all the blogs, they're watching all the podcasts, they're coming to all the meetups, like they are in. But they would never do that if you sat down with them and tried to have like a logical conversation for 2 hours. So this is like an interesting part of human psychology. If any of you want to get friends or family or stuff into crypto, send them $10 of it, or $100. Like it doesn't have to be a ton. And then when they check that price and it goes up, like their mind will be open, and then you really pill them.
Sweet. Okay, let's go there.
Thanks, Eric. So the question I want to ask is, what do you think the killer app for blockchain will be? Like, do you think, what do you think the process for the mass adoption of blockchain? Do you think it will be a gradual process, like cycle by cycle, like 4-year cycle, cycle by cycle, every cycle we have more people coming in? Or do you think it will be like the like a killer app like ChatGPT for AI? So I want to know your ideas.
Yeah, so this will be a little bleak of an answer. I think general adoption will follow like the sort of S-curve pattern that technologies tend to go through. The bottom of that S-curve is where we are now with, it goes faster when we're in a bubble and then down when we're not. But it really will ramp up only when the institution of fiat money itself becomes panicky, and when the world, right, not the radicals, but when the world starts really realizing that, like, oh wow, like we've built the entire financial system on sand. This is like sovereign bond collapse. This is like panic in the streets. This is serious problem and suffering for billions of people, and none of us should want to see that. None of us should celebrate that Bitcoin goes to $1 million when everyone's suffering. But I don't see a way that won't happen given the mathematics of how bond markets work and how debt is growing so fast relative to the revenues of the governments. Like, you don't have to be advanced in math to understand that will fall apart. And that is really what's going to jog people out of their habits. And that sucks. I wish it was the logical arguments, right? Like, I wish it was the slick new Coinbase ad that will get people to use this stuff. And they're doing great work, but like what's really going to cause the billions of people in that fast part of the slope to change their behavior is fear. And what we can do as people in this industry is build the tools and make it as easy as possible so that when those people have that fear, we can help them into a better system and teach them how to use it safely. And that's the noble goal that we should be focusing on.
Yeah, great. I was going to say, just to add to that, I've always said with mass adoption, usually comes from a good swift kick to the groin.
Yeah, the world's going to get kicked in the groin, for sure.
Just a quick follow-up. So you mean we should focus on create tools for get the adoption and like, do you think we will have a killer app like ChatGPT for AI? If we will have a killer app, which part will it come from? Like from NFT, from DeFi, from SocialFi, GameFi, or any other areas?
So some people wouldn't like me saying this, but the killer app of crypto has always been the desire of people to speculate and gamble. That is its killer app. That was the killer app of Bitcoin that got people interested in it. That's been the killer app through each cycle. It pulls tens of millions of people in. Again, because there's just something deep and reptilian about that feeling. That is the killer app. And it is the marketing department of crypto that it rises in price. Now, fortunately, like it's net beneficial. It's in aggregate rises far more than it falls. So the average person, it's not a net sum game or a net negative game like an actual casino. It's like a way to gamble where you actually have a positive EV, right? Like, this is, how cool is that? So yeah, that's really what'll cause it. And we as the participants should try to get adoption as quickly as we can, teach people the principles of it. We don't want them to stay focused on the gambling only, but once that entices them, like, pull them into the more fundamental principles.
Thoughts on Doge?
Okay, thoughts on Doge. So one of my favorite moments in crypto history was when this was maybe 2014. I went into this pub, had some lunch, and on the TV there was a NASCAR race. And I was watching the NASCAR just sort of casually. And then a Doge car, like a Dogecoin NASCAR, was driving around the racetrack with all the other cars at their like Conoco sponsorship and like all these things. It was one of the most surreal experiences. I didn't know there was going to be a Dogecoin car. It just showed up in this race. and that it was Dogecoin itself that ended up in this NASCAR race was perfect. Like if it was Bitcoin, it would have been a little cringe, but for the Doge car to be running around the track, it reminded me to always like have a sense of humor about this stuff, to not take it too seriously. It's amazing that Dogecoin is one of the longest lasting cryptocurrencies, right? So it's still funny for some reason, and whatever, like I know that people have gotten into cryptocurrency and learned the principles of decentralization because they first got interested from the meme coin. Like that's definitely happened to people. So yeah, I'm glad that it exists. I like people experimenting with stuff, and it's amazing like how powerful Dogecoin has been.
To the moon. Okay, we get a couple more. Are you good for time here? You okay? Yeah, all right.
You were saying earlier in the talk that you didn't have a way of foreseeing how Bitcoin and cryptocurrency eventually started branching out in all these cool and nifty ways with people experimenting. I'm just curious, like from your point of view, what are some of the most like innovative applications of utilizing blockchain technology for like everyday things that, you know, thinking beyond currency, that you've seen or are excited about right now?
I think just the ability to get like zero interest loans backed by crypto is very cool. Banks should be absolutely terrified of this ability for people to permissionlessly get loans like backed by their own liquid capital. I think that's one of the greatest innovations we've seen is like these collateralized loans, and I like it because it highlights crypto's pristineness as collateral. Like because the asset is so pristine as collateral and is so liquid, you can build all sorts of cool applications around it. So as a quick example, yeah, I'd say that.
Who's got a mic over there?
Hi, this is kind of like an extension to the AI question because I like your answer. Because I have been talking to my colleagues about decentralizing our, AI game engine stuff. So that kind of gets aligned with your answer. But there's another question though, another problem though, because that reminds me of the app Daymails, which is like the chatting app. I mean, like we are able to post a lot of different contents on Daymails. It's less censored, but in that case, especially when we are trying to go for mass adoption, the app was flooded by adult contents, right? Like porn, like violence and stuff. And at the end of the day, that app does not get that much traction anymore. So do you think that would be a problem? Because like if we are decentralizing the AI, right, without a lot of censorship, do you think that would be flooded with those contents?
Yeah, great question. I think this is where we separate protocol from application, right? So like protocols should be permissionless and open, no judgment. No judgment. Post whatever the hell you want that abides by the rules of the protocol. Obviously, a lot of people are going to use that for bad stuff, and a lot of good people don't want to see a lot of bad stuff, right? That's perfectly reasonable. Applications should design themselves for their target users. So an application, if it wants to censor all sorts of things, absolutely has the right to do so, right? It doesn't bother the lower chain, and it curates an experience for its particular customers. I think that's how decentralized systems should work. People can build to their own target markets. You can use the things that you like and let other people do the same. It's a very like live and let live kind of paradigm.
Can I have another short one? So because you are like one of the earliest adopter of Bitcoin and Ethereum, for example. Are you still like an advocate of Ethereum, especially towards the newcomers? Because another question with this would be, do you think changing to POS would be problematic for Ethereum?
Yeah, I am a huge fan of Bitcoin and ETH. And when someone is learning about this stuff and they're like, oh, what should I buy? I tell them 50-50 Bitcoin ETH. Just hold on to it and stop worrying about it. Bitcoin and Ethereum at this point have become really beautiful complements, and I'm glad that Ethereum switched to proof of stake, not because I think proof of stake is better. That remains to be seen over the long term. But part of decentralization is having different systems that work in different ways with different vulnerabilities, right? So there are vulnerabilities in proof of work that proof of stake doesn't have, and vice versa. I would much rather the cryptocurrency ethos is built on several like fundamental concepts instead of just one. There should be multiple chains, multiple design patterns. Like this is how decentralization works. So I'm glad that Ethereum has switched. Doesn't mean it's better. It might totally collapse in 10 or 20 years from cartelization. Like that's possible. Or Bitcoin mining might be totally stamped out because it has an energy grid signature that can be figured out like in meat space. Right? These are big existential problems on both sides. So I'm glad that we have both.
Impressive. Thank you very much, Erik.
Any other questions? One more question. Who's the last one? Who's our last one? Go ahead.
That was wonderful. Thanks for joining us here at Decentral. It's been a real treat
You're
and
welcome.
a surprise. I didn't know you were coming, so thank you. What brings you to Vancouver?
So here with my girlfriend, Riva. She's in town talking to a company, and so I'm in town with her for a few days. My brother actually lives here, so I'm going to send him to this place. Yeah, just passing by. That's all.
All right. Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you very much, Erik. And if people wanted to, well, yeah, that was. If people wanted to find you online, where's the best place to get in? Follow you.
I'm going to keep calling it Twitter. I'm
me too.
I'm on Twitter. Yeah. Twitter at Erik Voorhees. Spell it correctly, and you'll find me.
Perfect. All righty. Well, thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. If you don't mind, please fold up your chairs and just tuck them to the side. Feel free to hang out for a little bit. But, yeah, and make sure you claim your POAP up on the wall there. All right. Thanks, everyone. Good night. All right. Well, thank you very much. Let's do it right now. All good. But yeah, thank you very much for this all happening.